Hey everybody, it's Adam from IHP and welcome to our in-house staff meeting and the second episode of JC Unplugged. Those of you that haven't seen this before, what I'm going to be doing is reading staff-related training questions to Carlos, and the idea is for him to answer these questions within 90 seconds. This is our second episode. No problem in him answering these questions in 90 seconds, but what I'd like to do today is if we want to elaborate, we'll spend a little bit more time elaborating on the answers. So, here we go. First question. How does working with athletes who have to make a weight class affect your programming in terms of exercise selection, rest, rep ranges, all of that?
The weight cut is not an issue until the last week. So I would train a combat athlete the same way I would train a power athlete like a football player. However, of course, the exercises have to be specific to grappling and MMA and punching and whatnot. But the real issues come the last 10 days when they're making weight. So what would happen is I hit them with a big hit about 10 days out and then ease up over the last 10 days because that's when they start cutting weight and they start traveling to the event. So nothing changes until the last 10 days.
Got it. All right. This comes from one of our trainers who's actually still in her exercise science program. But her question is, in school, they teach us to perform cardio, then lift weights, and then perform their cool down or stretch. Is it more beneficial to do the cardio before or after your strength training?
That's a typical error that's made, and cardio never goes before strength training, ever. Not if you want to get strength training to produce strength training, right, effects. So no, cardio always gets done after strength training, so you do strength training fresh. When your neural system and metabolic systems are fresh, you put everything you've got into creating the muscular and tissue disruption that you need for the strength and hypertrophy response. Then, after you use a lot of your muscle glycogen, then you do your easy cardio, and it allows you to access your fat stores much faster.
Okay. Anybody want to relate? Add on to any of that?
How does that relate to an endurance athlete, triathlete, marathonist?
If you're the same way, for example, we know for a fact that strength training doesn't impact VO2 or doesn't impact your time to failure in cardio, but we know that cardio before strength training does impact 1 RMs and 8 repetitions max. So even for a strength athlete or an endurance athlete, what do you want? Do you want to get the strength out of your strength training session? Then do the strength training before and you can run unaffectedly afterwards.
Okay, another question here. What would be your supplementation recommendations for the youth group, like the ages of 10 to 15?
10 to 15, I would do probably the same recommendations that I would do for us sedentary individuals. Your standard are your multivitamins and your fish oils. Those should be standard for everybody. However, we now have a lot of research on creatine showing that it does a host of things. Everything from, of course, improving performance, but now having neurological enhancement qualities for anything from neurological diseases like peripheral neuropathies, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, etc. And you're also showing some ADD type of applications for creatine. So for the youth, creatine, beta-alanine is also a good option for performance. Oils, multivitamin, vitamin D, which is the biggest deficiency in vitamin worldwide right now. And those are my basics.
Just to make it clear, you don't sell, like you have no hacks in those games. You don't sell any of those supplements yourself. You're just giving the recommendations based off of.
Yeah, we don't even sell supplements here at IHP for the most part. When somebody asks us for supplements, we go like, oh, I got to order it, you know. So we only order supplements for the individuals who need it that don't want to go to the mall or to a store.
Okay. All right, this is like a two-part question. I'll just read them both to you. Describe what lactic acid is and how it affects the body during and post-exercise, and then do you think soft tissue therapies like massage therapy or foam rolling can help flush out lactic acid?
Let's start with what lactic acid is. Lactic acid is a byproduct of accelerated metabolism. However, lactic acid does not exist in the human body because as soon as it's made, it disassociates into hydrogen and lactate. Those are the only two things you can measure, lactate and hydrogen. Lactate is what they measure when they prick your finger after tests and stuff like that. That's what they're measuring because there's an association of a 1-to-1 lactic salt with a hydrogen ion. Lactate doesn't do anything. As a matter of fact, lactate is used as an energy source by organs and in certain tissues. The one that damages is the hydrogen. Hydrogen is what turns things acidic. High hydrogen count, high acid count, low pH level. That is what makes your legs burn when you're doing a leg crank. That's what makes your bicep burn when you're doing the curls. So that burn is what slows you down. Okay, so lactic acid doesn't exist. You can't clear it with a massage. You can't do any of that. All that is myth. Hydrogen. How do you deal with hydrogen? The easiest way to deal with hydrogen is pain tolerance. Get used to the pain and discomfort that it produces. Then there's suspicion that when you're training at high intensities, your body will create blood proteins such as bicarbonate that attach to a hydrogen and neutralize its acid type of effect. So that hasn't really been found yet, but I would say train high intervals, deal with hydrogen through pain, and you can massage it. It's great, and there is some applications for massage immediately after, but I don't think it's any better than walking around or going easy on a bike. I prefer massage because it does a lot more from a tissue perspective.
Okay. There we go. Were there any modifications that you made to IHP's programming after Stu McGill came out with his book, The Ultimate Back?
Yes, the simple answer is yes. We're always making modifications, always, whether anybody publishes a book or not. But one of the things that Stu McGill allowed us to do is understand why what we were doing was so effective. For example, we used to get our wrestlers tired and then have them carry each other. And we just did it because it was tough stuff and that's what you did in wrestling, but we found out that the core stiffness component, while you were pre-fatigued from a metabolic perspective, really allowed you to learn what core stiffness was about. It's like, wow. But with that core stiffness, we started saying, okay, we're going to start training people for rehabbing the back or for prevention, stiffen first, then dynamic movement. So Stu McGill was a driving force in that philosophy that we did recognize and started moving in that direction.
Now you can probably talk a little bit more about this if you want, but you also did a study with Stu McGill and Francisco Vera Garcia about the traditional supine bench press compared to the standing 2-arm and 1-arm cable press. I don't know if you want to touch upon that, but it kind of falls in the same line as core stiffness and what we've been doing.
Yeah, that's another thing that we knew what we were going to find ahead of time. We knew we were going to find a higher core activation from a standing press than from a lying down press, right? Like the bench press. But what we didn't know was the actual math. And it turns out that when you're staggered stance and you're pushing at shoulder level, give or take, you can only push about 40% of your body weight before that front foot comes up. So if you look at a 200-pound person, 40%, that's 80 pounds. 200-pound person can easily bench press 300 pounds. You go, okay, if you can only push 80 from a standing, but you're bench pressing 300, what are you doing with the other 220? And the answer to that is getting a bigger chest and shoulder issues. So the standing cable press, we really made it popular here at IHP, and now we understand why.
Yeah, and that's a really good article, research article, if you guys want to get it. Carlos did it with Francisco Vera Garcia and Stu McGill, and it talks about how valuable core stiffness is. You know, why are we spending time with athletes doing bench presses when they're up on their feet pushing? I'm going to jump to this question because I think it might relate to this, the whole core stiffening. Regarding proper breathing techniques, is utilizing the Valsalva maneuver during squats, deadlifts, bench press still appropriate technique, or should another approach be implemented?
The Valsalva maneuver is mandatory, not appropriate, mandatory. You cannot exert high levels of energy. You can't exert high levels of stress, especially standing up while you're carrying something if your core is not stable. And the one thing that stabilizes the core is when you do this. And you brace. Not draw in, brace. And brace is what you're going to do if I say, all right, get ready, I'm going to punch you in the stomach. Everybody braces, all right? So what that does, believe it or not, is the diaphragm, you take a big breath and the diaphragm goes down. So right off the bat you have compression. When you go like this and you tighten this up, this increases the pressure in inner thoracic, inner abdominal pressure. And that, your spine is like this, all right? So your guts are here, your diaphragm is there. When it comes down, it compresses this. All right, your muscles are pulling in, your internal, external obliques, your rectus is serving as the anterior spine, and your TVA is actually doing very little, believe it or not. All right, and here's your pelvic floor. When this goes in, this pressure goes up, and that supports the spine there, okay, and keeps it from hyperextending under load or hyperflexing under flexion. All right, so it is mandatory. As a matter of fact, if you look at the squatting procedure for per the NSCA, is unwrap, take a big breath, descend, and when you're coming up, exhale. So you take a big breath before you even bend your knees. Go down, and when you come out of the sticking position is when you exhale. So there you have it. And anybody who's seen birth knows about the Lamaze. That's exactly what the ladies are doing as well. So.
Okay, what are the pros and cons of doing an assisted single leg squat by holding onto a suspension strap like a TRX or SBT?
You could do it, you know, but I don't like the suspension systems for that. They could be useful. It's just not my preferred choice. Number one, I would say pump. And if you need a little bit of depth and learn, with bad knees, this is what I prefer. I take any situation here, and I can go like this, and I can get down a little further and assist my squat by 10, 15 pounds. So that's my preferred way to do assisted single leg moves.
Let's see here. A couple more questions here. When dealing with clients that swing implements such as a baseball bat or a construction worker using a sledgehammer, or maybe an opponent's got to grab and flip someone's got to grab and flip their opponent. You can only pick one. You can only pick one area. Are you going to place greater training emphasis on grip, forearm, and hand strength, or core strength?
If it's gripping an implement, anything, wrist. You have to have gripping. You can't throw what your body can't grip. End of story, period. You can have a solid core, and if you can't hold on to the bat, if you can't turn it over, you may be swinging very hard. You're not going to hit one ball. If you have a super core and I can't grab a hold of you, if I grab your sleeve in judo, you rip the sleeve off my hand, I can't do anything. If I'm wrestling and I'm trying to get wrist control and I can't get wrist control and you're like this, shooting in on me, I can't do anything. So in order for you to exercise your core, this is the gateway to the outside world with the other body. And this is what the body decides what it's going to throw or not, or pick up or not. If you have a weak wrist, here's an observation. You take bodybuilders that can take dumbbells in this position and go like this, do laterals with 30, 40 pounds. You get them in the trunk of a car, you bend your wrist and have them take a toolbox out like this, they can't take it out. They got to get in on it to upright row. Why? Because their wrist is not used to, the delta is not used to lifting with the wrist broken like this. So as soon as you get the wrist in a position, or the hands in a position you're not familiar with, neural inhibition will shut down anything that moves that arm. So it's very important that you learn how to grip parallel, perpendicular, circumventing, pronation, and supination. All right? From a combat standpoint, that's huge.
What are your thoughts on this? I heard this a while ago, and it was that the brain won't let you grip what the shoulder can't handle. I mean, there's a lot of...
I think it's the opposite. I think the shoulder, the brain won't let you lift what your wrist can't hold.
When you grip something, it sends a signal, like, so if I'm going to grip something really heavy, it sends a signal to the shoulder through the CNS based on my grip. You know,
Yes.
So if I give it like a hard grip, it lets it know, hey, we're going to have to stabilize, we're going to have to work. Whereas if I just go in...
And it's specificity. At the end of the day, specificity rules training. If I'm strong in a parallel, in a perpendicular orientation, and all of a sudden you get me in a parallel orientation, you can't really expect for me to be really good at it if I've never seen it. Because training is specific. So these guys that are doing farmer walks like this for combat grip, I'm going, you better be holding your athlete down here. Because as soon as you grab and he's doing this to his arms and you're doing this, that farmer's grip is nothing. Plus, if you're used to a bar or a dumbbell that thick, as soon as you grab a forearm that's like that, or a neck or a shoulder that's like that, it's over. It's over. You're not going to have any transfer.
Right. That's where your clamp and your lockdown.
The lockdowns, the judo
Grips,
sleeves,
judo
the clamps,
sleeves.
all of our gripping equipment is made to specifically train grip.
What's the name of the DVD?
Grip dominant.
Dominator. Yeah. Okay. Couple more questions here. I think just one more. Is it appropriate to perform sprints within the same strength and conditioning session, or is it best to perform on alternate days?
What do you want to get out of it? If you want to get metabolic training, you can do it at the end of your strength training, power endurance training, hypertrophy training. It's awesome. Okay. If what you're trying to do is get power, then especially in the Eastern Bloc countries, what they used to do is have big gymnasiums, with turf and whatnot, indoors with racks, and they would actually squat 5, 6 heavy reps, 3 heavy reps, move out and sprint and do a 100-meter or do a flying 30 or do a start. So if you wanted a complex training, you're going to have to do it immediately after a lift if you want that application. If you want just metabolic training, do your workout and then step out and just hammer. We do that all the time. We do our Versa Climber hits, our incline trainer hits, our 300, all of our metabolic stuff after the workouts.
What about if you want to get a little more specific to a football player who's got to prepare for a combine running the 40, or a baseball player who's got to showcase a 60-yard sprint, performing strength and conditioning on the same days that they're going to train?
If you're working on technical issues, the start, arm positioning, reaction time, I would do that fresh. Maybe do that in the morning, and then have your lifting session afterwards, or in the afternoon, or that evening. I think you get a good lifting session in the morning, especially if you're doing upper body, or if you do just a power lower body and you give yourself 6-7 hours of rest with a good nap and everything, I think you can still come back that evening and do very good technical speed work.
Got it. I think that was the last question. So what we'll do is we'll be back in a couple of weeks with episode 3, JC Unplugged. Thanks for tuning in.